Commission, the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission, and our Sustainability Commission. And I do know that we're trying something new, so I will turn it over to Laura or Emily to explain what we're doing and then introduce our speakers for this evening.
So yes, thank you, Mayor. And Emily, why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit for those joining, because I know we've had some questions in the chat box about our webinar view, and then I'll hop back into getting our work session kicked off.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for everyone bearing with us. We wanted to shift our regular meetings to webinar format through Zoom, which is not something we've done before. So we thought this, which would have kind of a broader appeal anyway, and potentially a greater number of attendees, would be a nice time to begin that. So we are streaming live is my intent eventually. I started it on the YouTube channel. We will try it on the Facebook as soon as I can hop off again. So everyone, the governing body, our guests this evening, and Laura Smith, our city administrator, and myself so far are considered panelists at this time. Everyone else who's joining, thank you for coming. You're considered an attendee, so you can interact with us through the chat or the Q&A feature. So we'll be monitoring those for the interactive portion. We have just two quick polling questions we'll do a bit later, some opening comments from Laura Smith, then a presentation from our guests, and then we'll just do some brief discussion. So thanks everyone for joining us for this kind of joint session and experiment at the same time. I think I covered the bases, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know through the chat.
Thank you, Emily. So I think we've said welcome to the joint work session enough times, but welcome to the joint work session. We're excited to be here this evening and have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the KC Regional Climate Action Plan. I think most of you know that the City of Mission is no stranger to sustainability conversations and initiatives. It's something that we've been really actively involved in for close to 15 years. But as Climate Action KC and MARC in the last 12 to 18 months really began to collaborate, I know that many of you, many on our governing body, several on our boards and commissions have been involved in that process in one way or another, whether serving on committees or task forces or participating in the summit that was held. And there have been elements of the plan that have been bubbling up in our conversations really for the last several months. So at the council and staff retreat back in February of 2020, which was about the last time we were all together in person, there was a lot of conversation around establishing a more focused sustainability lens to help guide some of our conversations and assist us in establishing priorities, goals, and objectives around many of these things. So now that the regional action plan has been finalized, we felt it was an appropriate time to have the presentation and to begin really thinking about what that might look like in terms of initiatives or policies for our community. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Emily to introduce our presenters. And then once we get through our presentation this evening, kind of talk a little bit about what we expect to be next steps.
Sure, and actually I will leave that to Joan for the introductions, but I will do a poll. It's just two quick questions, but it allows us all to know who is here and kind of lay a little bit of foundation. So if everybody gets your virtual pencils ready, I will launch the poll and we can do those questions. So it definitely does look to me like we have kind of the target audience of the blend that we reached out to. So it's a great baseline discussion for our commissions and governing body as well as staff together.
Any members of the public joining us this evening?
Yes, as long as they didn't click Mission Resident because before they clicked something else.
Gotcha.
There could be a multiple choice. Apologies on that. Okay, everyone have a chance? And then big majority before tonight knew about the plan being on deck. So with that, if you're ready, Laura, I think we can toss it to Joan. Thank you. I'm gonna look at the poll results. Okay.
Would you like me to begin?
Sure, Joan, thank you.
My turn, great, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm Joan Levins. I coordinated sustainability for the Shawnee Mission School District for a number of years before retiring last summer. I'm also a co-chair of the Climate Action Plan as part of the Climate Action KC organization. Karen Claussen is here, and Karen, what if you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Claussen. I'm a principal planner with Mid-America Regional Council. I'm also a program manager for our air quality and our rideshare mobility programs.
And she also really drove the process for the plan. She, along with Tom Jacobs, were instrumental in doing that. Climate Action KC is a regional organization that is, over 100 volunteers, many of whom are elected officials. And it came together several years ago for this very purpose, just to discuss climate and climate change in our region. Mid-America Regional Council was kind enough to jump in and actually take the lead on this. And so as a result, a year later, after launching the process, we have a climate action plan. We recruited electeds in our region and other volunteers to help present these plans to the municipalities across the 120 municipalities across our region, as well as the 10 counties in the MARC region. It is a regional plan. It is intended to be flexible and is intended to be a collaborative effort that is completely flexible and adaptable to each individual situation. I'm going to switch to I'm going to share my screen. We'll see how this works, and I'll start into the presentation. Are we sharing, or is the mission logo still there?
Yes, looks good.
It's there? Okay, great. This plan is, again, as I said, voluntary, flexible, and collaborative. It's a framework, so it's meant to be adaptable to each community. As we go through the presentation, we'd like you all to consider what actions you've already taken that you can sort of check off as accomplished or well on our way. What other actions might be low-hanging fruit, things that are easy wins. And then thirdly, what are the longer range aspirational goals for your community that will help get us all to a net zero region by 2050? We started with a lower goal, a lower outcome for this plan, but what we heard from the community as we spoke with them, over 1,000 community members and over 300 meetings, was that they wanted us to aim higher, and so we have done that. There are several guiding thoughts in this plan. First is that so much of what we need to do, we want to do. The Climate Action Plan already aligns with many of the regional plans that have been adopted by the governing bodies in our region. We all want healthy, livable communities where our families can thrive, where we have safe, affordable transportation options, where we have access to food and jobs and opportunities for economic success, and places where we have connection to one another and can build community. We've already proven that we can do this. And in Mission, as Laura said, you all are leaders in our region and in fact are among the first to receive this presentation. You have already completed an assessment of your Parks and Recreation plan and have a plan in place. You have a mission sustainability scorecard for new development. You signed the United States Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement in 2005, a long time ago. And you conducted a greenhouse gas emissions benchmarking inventory as long ago as 2008. So you have already begun the work and are well on your way. So we know this can be done. The solutions must match the scale of the challenge. If we start with our own homes and ourselves and the actions that we personally can take, we can then scale up to the city and to the region. Our 10-county region is our goal. Leadership comes from all of us, and we really believe it's important that we include equity, that we assure everyone is at the table, and that we view each of us ourselves as leaders in this process. We need to assure all of us are here. And finally, do no harm. Doing nothing is harmful. Doing a lot is possible. And I think we've seen that through the many actions that have been undertaken in our community. Karen, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, that was great.
We didn't practice tag teaming this. So how did we set a baseline? We looked at data from 2015 and did a greenhouse gas inventory and found that 2/3 of our emissions are from our buildings, residential and commercial buildings. 1/3 is from transportation. We added in the waste sector because we recognize that especially organic waste can contribute far greater emissions than transport. Well, the kinds of emissions that food waste generates is extremely toxic and damaging. And so we know that if we address the food waste sector, that we can make real inroads. And in addition, we'll measure our success by conducting a greenhouse gas inventory every few years and releasing those results so we can see the progress that we're making. The group also conducted a climate risk and vulnerability assessment, and through that process found that our 3 highest concerns are, with the highest probability and the greatest impact, are flooding, extreme heat, and drought. It's counterintuitive that both flooding and drought would be our primary concerns. However, if you're like me and dealing with wet basement and alternate years with a dying lawn for the last several years, you know that we are in a cycle of flooding and drought, and that climate change is all about extremes. We also mapped the areas of socioeconomic stress and know that we've learned from the pandemic that many communities who are experiencing stress from the pandemic are also those communities that we expect to experience the greatest impacts from climate change. So we've targeted those communities so that we assure we address needs in those communities and make sure that they are a part of the solution. We have 9 action areas in the plan that contain specific goals and strategies focused on mitigation and adaptation. Some strategies like tree planting are both mitigation and adaptation. So many of these strategies have multiple benefits. 3 of the 9 action areas listed right there at the top left are a little bit different. Their collaboration and leadership is going to be a coordinated effort across the region. We are looking to each community, like Mission, to identify the leaders in your community, a leader that can be a representative as a part of this leadership process. Innovation and the need for creative financing is another common thread throughout the plan. It's important that we sort of think differently than we have about these issues. And the third is community resilience, which is about building the social connections to support not only the actions in the plan, but also address resilience. As crises happen, we come together as a community, and with the can-do Kansas City spirit, we address those issues as they arise. Whoops, wrong direction. Adaptation is the response to those climate vulnerabilities that we mentioned. The flooding, drought, and extreme heat. Food and agriculture is one of the major areas that we're looking at. We make healthy food more accessible when we support home gardening, community gardens, and the Mission Farmers Market also is a great example of bringing food accessibility right into communities and making it accessible on foot. People can walk or ride their bike to the community market. Staging it on a Thursday evening is also a great way to sort of address alternative options for families who'd like to get out and access local food. Nature-based solutions means putting nature to work for us. The earth is a self-sustaining system. It strives for equilibrium constantly. Let's put it to work for ourselves. Planting trees absorbs stormwater, provides shade, increases human comfort, as one example. Finance and innovation. Again, we'd like to link to the entrepreneurial ecosystem in our community. We have lots of incubators and accelerators. Let's pitch some of these ideas to them and let them help resolve some of the questions that we have. If we invest in solutions, we can create more businesses and more jobs. And mentioned organic waste. We generate 350,000 tons of food waste each year. And I know in Johnson County, that makes up 23% of the landfill in Johnson County. In Shawnee Mission, we compost the students' food waste in every school and in every building, which participates in extending the life of the landfill. If we can keep the food waste out, our landfill will last longer. That reduces costs for everyone. But in addition, methane is released as the food decomposes, which is 21 times more, has 21 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. So composting turns that waste into soil. In Shawnee Mission, through a partnership with Kansas City Community Gardens, Missouri Organic brings that compost back so the kids can grow more food. We could blow that up on a larger scale. And lastly, resilient infrastructure. As we rebuild our gray infrastructure, how do we make it more resilient and more people-centered? How do we plant more trees and make the sidewalks comfortable places to walk? The shade from the trees also extends the life of the street coverings. So if we make our solutions more human-centered, they're also more resilient. Karen, do you have anything at this point?
I don't think so. You
Okay.
got it.
All of the plan has linkages throughout. Each action area is linked to other pieces of the plan. Composting is one of those areas that links various parts of the plan. Another is that Climate Action KC is launching the Building Energy Exchange, which the services will improve the efficiency of buildings, reduce utility costs for energy and water, and thereby making housing more affordable. Along the way, we intend to create jobs in these sectors to boost the local economy. And in the third area, these 15-minute neighborhoods is a great concept. If we can create neighborhoods where most of our services are close by and we can walk to them or ride our bikes to them, we reduce the need for our cars. Just as an example for ourselves and our family, our car service center moved way out south, but we have a garage just within a couple blocks of our home. So I started taking the car there. I can now walk the car over and walk home and come back later to pick it up. There are lots, and we just have started evaluating our neighborhood, what's right here that we can walk to and get to easily. So those are some of this, just a few of the examples of system linkages. So what is your role? Local government policies and programs are part of a piece, are your role, is the piece of this that you all can pick up. And I know Solly Flora and Hillary Parker Thomas are part of Climate Action KC. Hillary Parker Thomas's favorite page in the book is page 52, which lists some of these policy options. So The first on the list is energy. I know that you all have adopted Renewables Direct, which means that you're purchasing your you're purchasing wind energy from Evergy, which is a huge first step. You can start to consider what comes next. Urban greening, if you encourage street trees, again, that extends the life of the street, the asphalt, but it also creates human comfort and gathering places in neighborhoods. It reduces that heat island effect, and again, brings people together through partnerships, for example, with Johnson County Stormwater Management Council, Advisory Council. They offer incentives for residents, and I'm sure that you have some of those in place in Mission, for planting trees or planting a native garden, rain garden to capture stormwater, or a rain barrel. All of those kinds of things, again, are finding the linkages in the partnerships. For transportation and land use, here's an example of curb cuts made so that water gathers in the middle of the street in a native garden. And along the way, they've created not just a spot for beauty, but a functional asset, and protected bicycle riders who are using that corridor along the street. Creatively, they've spruced up the crosswalk so that it's actually a piece of art. There's so many ways in which to consider transportation and land use, in creating more walkable, bikeable streets, but also increasing the physical and mental health of residents. And lastly, food and agriculture. This is a photo at Missouri Organic. They collect produce from grocery stores that can no longer be sold and can no longer be served either. Harvesters picks up what can be served. If it's so far out of date or rotting, it goes to Missouri Organic. We are fortunate to have a commercial composter here in our region. It made composting for the Shawnee Mission School District possible. There are vendors and municipalities in our region who are experimenting or piloting vendors who will come collect compost curbside for residents and deliver it to Missouri Organic to be composted. That's just kind of one example. We compost in our backyard, don't tell my city. But that has also been just a great way for us to build soil that we spread around our shrubs, and reduces the mulch purchases that we have to make. Local government action, it's really up to you. What is of greatest interest to you? What are your community priorities? I know that you all have talked about perhaps applying a sustainability lens to the work of your departments, boards, and commissions. What does some of that look like? It can be through planning and decision-making. Again, applying that sustainability lens to the decisions that are made in your community is one way of doing that. You can lead by example, and you are doing that already. If another step could be to adopt the draft resolution that's available that endorses the plan and says that you and your constituents resolve to review the plan and implement strategies that make the most sense for you. And then lastly, think like a partner. Build partnerships with the schools, with the county, with your neighboring jurisdictions. I know, just as a Shawnee Mission employee and partner to Mission, some of our students at Horizons High School wanted to plant a sustainable garden to sort of to spruce up their marquee. I'm not sure it was completely successful, but we do appreciate that the City of Mission, Emily, and several council members joined the students, helped them review their plans, gave them the encouragement to proceed, and in the students then executed their plan with the support of the city. There are so many partnerships like that, and throughout our community, there are also lots of nonprofits that would love to work with you. I'll give the floor to Karen. Just as the last slide, this is the contact information, and I'll let Karen kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, and Joan, I think we may have missed one slide in kind of showing how greenhouse gas emissions might be reduced by the strategies in the plan. At least I didn't see it, but that might be helpful to show if you can navigate back to it.
Yes, I may have skipped that. This one?
Yes, that one.
Okay, great. Yes.
And I'm happy to speak towards this. Yeah, so we know through our analysis that 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent must be reduced by 2050 in order to reach our net zero goal. And we used our greenhouse gas emissions inventory to help us focus in on which strategies make the most sense. So Joan said that, you know, about 2/3 of our emissions are coming from the energy sector, and another third is coming from transportation. So the mitigation side of our plan responds according to that. And you can see here how or where the reductions will be over time, and where we can't kind of make up that 17% of emissions. We will employ a lot of sequestration techniques. And so that kind of gives more importance to what Joan was saying about planting trees and native landscapes and rain gardens and beginning that work now, because you know those, you know, especially trees, we need to give them time to grow and to reach their full sequestration potential. So.
Great. I think we'd like to open it up to questions from any and all.
For a moment, as I pull everyone back, Karen, do you mind going into a bit of detail about how the plan came together and the hours and hours of work that went into it, just as background, as I bring everybody back?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. So we spent the, you know, the first year of the planning process working on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which included, you know, data collection from all of our utility partners, and then also working on that climate risk and vulnerability assessment. The most exciting part, I mean, all of that was exciting, but for me, most of the excitement was about engaging the public and community stakeholders in the process. We held, you know, the pandemic kind of shaped our engagement process quite a bit, but we held a multi-week online engagement process that covered all of the topics that are included in the plan today. And we also put together many technical teams to help us kind of synthesize the information that we got from the private sector, the public sector, nonprofit sector, anybody who had some sort of expertise around you know, energy or transportation. We brought them together to help really bring that knowledge into our plan. And then we spent a lot of time working with committees at MARC and talking to local governments before kind of wrapping up in the development process of the plan. So now we're done. MARC board adopted this just about a month ago. So it's fresh and we're excited to implement it.
Thank you. Laura, I don't know if we have any questions, answer. We can do Q&A or chat if anybody in the attendee list would like to ask a question.
Yeah, and if anyone on the council has questions or comments, and the only other thing maybe is perhaps if Joan, if you might speak, or Karen speak a little bit to the ambassador program and how you envision that relationship as we move forward.
Sure. And Karen can jump in here too. We've recruited ambassadors across the metro and have provided a training for them. Everyone has the same presentation. We anticipate reaching out to targeting governments primarily during these first months, and but we also are receiving requests for presentations to Rotary clubs, chambers of commerce, and so on. So the ambassadors are available to sort of initiate the process with each municipality, but Karen and Tom and the MARC staff are really your technical experts who can help sort of, they are familiar with the policies, they are familiar with the region, what else is going on in the region, and they can kind of guide the process for each municipality. I am also willing to serve as a connector for Mission, but that's primarily. And Karen, I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are right. Because this is a regional plan and we have we have 120 separate municipalities in the region. This ambassador program will help kind of expand the reach of MARC and Climate Action KC, so we can talk to as many people as possible. And while we are focusing right now on local governments, because that's where a lot of the action will happen, we do want to provide information and be resources to all sorts of groups, some of which Joan already mentioned, whether it's Rotary clubs or chambers of commerce, neighborhood associations, church groups. We're interested in connecting and seeing if we can spark any partnerships and ideas within those organizations. And if any of you are connected or affiliated with organizations that might be interested, please lean on us. We'd love to come and talk and kind of engage in discussions about the climate action plan.
And if I'm not mistaken, Councilmember Thomas is one of the plan ambassadors.
Exactly. Hillary Parker Thomas is a plan ambassador. She's also the policy co-chair for Climate Action KC. Sally Flora is a climate leader, as well as a past convener of the Climate Action Advisory, which was sort of the leadership of the entire organization. So you have several council members who are very active in providing leadership in Climate Action KC.
Joan, Karen, I have a quick question, if I can chime in. Would you say that the next, I mean, every city is unique in what the next steps are, but would you say the next recommended step for cities would be to adopt the resolution in a particular form that makes sense for each city?
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of great next steps for cities. I think Joan kind of went through some of them. Considering the plan and how it relates to the work that cities have already done is important. The city of Lenexa, when we put out our climate action playbook, which was kind of a precursor to the plan, they went through all of their plans and their policies and almost did an audit to see how they aligned with the playbook. And that exercise went really well for them. And so I would suggest, to cities as a first step to take on that type of activity. I think, adopting a resolution makes a lot of sense. We're also asking local governments to think about vulnerability in their cities because the climate risk and vulnerability assessment that we did was very, it was at a regional scale, and I think it'll be important to kind of, get into it in more detail at the local, the municipality level, because each city is a little bit different, right? And your population is different. And MARC is here as a resource to help guide you through that process if necessary.
Thank you. We do have a question in the Q&A from Andy Highland that gets to a bit of what you were discussing with the Climate Action Playbook. Everybody can read it for themselves, but I think in general, the audit kind of, Joan is demonstrating the playbook, but he asks, which of the many menu options would have the greatest impact? Which of them, based on your knowledge and expertise, would seem the easiest to implement? And of course, that's a big lift, but maybe the audit gets there.
I would say, because we know that most of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from the energy sector, the biggest impact that cities can make is on energy efficiency. You've already, joined Renewables Direct. That's a huge step forward. But for energy efficiency, especially in your older homes and older buildings, finding ways to develop programs or finding, funding and financing to help homeowners improve the efficiency of their homes, that will go a really long way. The city of Mission has done a lot of great things in transportation already. So you know, how can you push that even further? And you have great walkability in your town center area. How can you help maybe partner with other cities to build more connections when it comes to transportation? Those are the most impactful things. Are they the easiest? Maybe not. Some of the easier ones might be planting trees and providing shade and some other comfort measures for people as they, you know, are outside using more active transportation and that type of thing. It's going to depend on which city you're in. If you're already kind of going down one path, it should be easier to kind of scale up in certain areas. Whereas if you're a city that hasn't tackled a particular strategy in the plan, it's, you know, going to be a little bit bigger of a lift. But I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
And Karen, if I could add really quick, just because Joan mentioned page 52, for anybody that has the plan pulled up, you know, and if you don't quite have time to dig into it, it is, you know, it's dense. And so that's why I really like page 52, because it just gives a really good highlight of the most immediate needs of action for local municipalities. And so page 52, I recommend it. And then within those actions, they have examples of either ordinances or you know, resolutions, whatever it is, connected to different organizations or municipalities that have taken that action. And so there's great examples within the plan, but I know that MARC and Climate Action KC is working on additional resources so that we can have those model ordinances ready to go for cities as cities begin to shape up what the process looks like.
great. And we do have another question from Charlie Torpedo. Why was 2015 greenhouse gas data used? If you could speak to that.
Yeah, so that without making this too complicated or convoluted, 2015 data was used before we had determined that we were going net zero by 2050. The original target we had set forth was in alignment with the Paris Agreement, which is basically an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels by 2050. So when you go through that process, we didn't have good 2005 data. So what we did was we got the data from the furthest away year from us, which was 2015. And 2015 was like when we could get complete utility data, and then we backcasted to 2005. In the end, it didn't even matter because we ended up changing our target to net zero by 2050, in which case, moving forward, we'll just use the current data that we have. So hopefully that makes some sense, but that's why we used that year. It was the first year of clear, clean, comprehensive data that we could get.
Okay, great. And he has a follow-up. According to the greenhouse gas inventory, 61% of greenhouse gases are from commercial, institutional, and residential buildings. Sequestration is a major element of the proposed mitigation efforts. What emerging green technologies, if any, are considered to achieve reductions in these categories?
Sequestration, we're mostly talking about nature-based solutions for sequestration. But that doesn't mean that there could be some sequestration, you know, more of a mechanized carbon capture, for instance, that becomes more mainstream and readily available that we couldn't employ to get us down to net zero. But because there's so much speculation right now, it's hard to measure what the potential impact of those technologies would be. But we're definitely open to it in all their various forms, whether it's you know, carbon capture on, you know, coal plants right now before we're able to transition away from fossil fuels. There's even some that are based on algae in big tanks pulling down carbon. So all things are on the table for sequestration.
Thank you. And we had another question from Terry Bob, more for city folks. When can we meet in person? Can we set up workshops at the Pell Community Center to introduce our citizens to the whole issue around climate action plans? And I think I can address a bit of that, just that we will be hosting some special events that would lend themselves to that sort of thing, with, tabling at the Mission Market again, monitoring safety protocols as needed as we go through the summer. But I think we're inching back to that. And Terry, I think even still virtual, but also with safety in mind, kind of getting back into the streets, so to speak, is on the horizon sooner rather than later. And then Councilmember Flora did mention, just as a correction, that page 52 of the Climate Action Plan, not the Playbook. So there are the two documents, but the magic on page 52 for the local government action categories is in the Climate Action Plan.
And I would like to mention that Councilman Flora chaired the policy committee when this was the work of the policy committee. And this is a comprehensive document. Mission is mentioned on page 18. So it's local and regional examples. It is, this came first and the Climate Action Plan follows. But if you're looking for something to thumb through that also provides lots of information, this is a great document.
Great. And we have another question from Josh Theedy. Can you provide more information on the building energy exchange? Is this public buildings, private buildings, renters, landlords, commercial, residential, or all of the above?
All of the above, I would say. I think there's, because our plan is equity and justice centered, I think there's going to be a push within the building energy exchange to really focus on the building stock, especially residential building stock, within our more vulnerable areas of the region first. But all buildings are going to fall under that program as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I did have a question. It's in the plan, but maybe a bit, especially when you ended on the measurement slide and the source of it. Could you talk kind of about the next steps, the plan, the 2, 3, 5 year plan kind of, and then, the measuring, when will you do the touch points and the goal checking, et cetera?
Yeah, kind of getting back to the greenhouse gas inventory. We are a partner with the Global Covenant of Mayors, their North American regional program. And I believe we're committed to like a 3 or 4 year inventory cycle. And so expect to see in maybe 2 or 3 years, the next iteration of that. And hopefully we will have made some good progress. I haven't looked at the kind of near-term plan in a while, so I apologize. But the biggest thing we want to get started right now is putting together a coordinating council that helps bring together organizations, local governments, anybody who is kind of active in working on climate action right now as part of MARC's committee structure, working on the building energy exchange. That's a near-term thing that will be accomplished. They've hired an executive director, so they're getting that stood up right now. Working on adopting model ordinances. So this, these type of presentations are the first step towards doing that and bringing more resources. We also want to do more engagement with the public. The pandemic, put some constraints on what we were able to do. And so we know we need to do a lot more engagement, especially as local governments and even, things we can do at the regional level. As they're implemented, we can engage more people to help refine the solution and make sure it is appropriate and useful for especially vulnerable communities. We're working on a communications plan to help make sure that people are hearing about the plan and are able to engage in it. Those are kind of the main points in the near-term work plan.
Thank you for that. And just to mention that Councilmember Flora did include a link that takes you to more information about the background on the exchange if anyone's interested in clicking through there. We've got another question from Charlie Trapito. Is it possible to get a breakdown from the greenhouse gas inventory of the numbers for concrete and asphalt, state and local government capital improvement projects in terms of tons emitted?
Okay. our greenhouse gas inventory did not cover each and every sector that you can possibly include in an inventory. I think the next iterations might include some of these things, like concrete and asphalt. But as we know, concrete is pretty intensive and carries a huge carbon footprint. So I appreciate the question. I unfortunately don't have that data for you at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I am not seeing any other questions at this time. Oh, Councilmember Flora.
Yes, I think as a panelist, I couldn't figure out how to post in the Q&A. But I just had a question about those model ordinances and or the other technical support you mentioned. And I know, Joan, in your presentation, you covered that the region-wide goal is 2050 for net zero, but my understanding is the goal is that municipal operations be net zero by 2030, which is a lot more ambitious timeline. And so I was wondering if you had any more insight on sort of, when those model ordinances will be available, if the other technical support, starts now, if we have an ordinance that we want to adapt from somewhere else, what does that process look like?
I know at MARC we've been working on a host of kind of tree protection ordinances, and so those are, I think, ready to roll in case any local governments want to adopt those. And Joan, I believe the policy committee may be working on some other ones, but we're as there's interest from local governments. We'll be working on some additional ones, but Joan, I don't know if you have any additional information on that.
Hillary Parker Thomas could answer that question.
Hillary, okay.
But I do, before she does that, I think that there are a number of ordinances available through Mid-America Regional Council, Green Infrastructure Framework and Policy Book. There are multitudes in addition to the model tree ordinance, and those could be reference points.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, so the Policy Committee of Climate Action KC has really just started to dig into creating a resource toolkit, if you will, utilizing the plan that already exists. And we want to have model ordinances ready to go for cities, hopefully within the next couple months. So again, that communication will come out to cities as we get those ready.
Great, and I am still not seeing any additional questions. So I don't know.
I might ask one. On page 49 in the plan, it's kind of an implementation and monitoring schedule. And I know there is both a 1-year work plan and then a 3-year work plan that kind of outlines, as I understand it, what MARC and Climate Action KC, where you'll be focusing your efforts. Do you anticipate that will be updated on an ongoing basis? So that will be kind of a continually evolving. Is that something that cities could look to help kind of guide if we were looking to keep ourselves aligned with some of the same priorities of the larger overall plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would consider the implementation, the 1-year, 3-year work plans to be kind of evergreen. We'll be updating those. We're actually, so you may be aware that the plan now lives on a website, and it's kcmetroclimateplan.org. It's still kind of in its infancy, but I think as we build that out over time, that'll be the hub for information about kind of where we are, what progress we've made. And we'll be highlighting a lot of the successes, not just on the regional level. Obviously, we want to highlight the successes mostly of local governments who are doing all of the work. So that'll be the place where you can kind of keep in, I don't know, kind of lockstep with us as a region. Yeah.
Still no questions, so maybe we are coming to an end. Okay.
If there aren't any other questions, I just wanted to touch briefly on kind of, at least from a staff perspective, and obviously we'll be following up with the council and guidance, but I think that are just kind of thinking about next steps. And one of the reasons that we wanted to get this out in front of you now, as well, is because we are starting to enter into our annual budget cycle. And so as we think about budget goals and objectives, not just for the 22 budget cycle, but beyond, I think it's a good opportunity to really put some of these policies and ideas in front of us and again, help focus that conversation and that sustainability lens. I think it's important to think about both the long and short-term goals. I think both Joan and Karen mentioned, as we go through this, we'll also kind of recapture and report back many of the successes that we've already had here in Mission, and then targeting some of that low-hanging fruit, as well as looking at, again, our longer-term objectives. So I think, I don't know if, and I really think that, with this lens, I think there's some work that happens top down and bottom up both. So I think the council in looking at and starting to really have this document now to guide conversations, again, can help set objectives, share those down to our various boards and commissions. But I think we would also encourage our boards and commissions to look at that and identify potential priorities that they can send back up for council consideration and discussion as well. So our hope is that we can use this living, breathing, I think, document to help kind of advance us in the direction that we've identified as being important. And that's all I have this evening, unless there's anyone on the council would like to talk more about your expectations for next steps. Yes,
Laura, I had one question. I had one question related to that. So you mentioned, working in coordination with our boards and commissions, and I was just wondering if we'd have a time for, further council discussion, and maybe it comes along with looking at adopting the resolution in favor of the climate action plan. But it seems like, providing some more direct guidance from council to our boards and commissions about sort of, any expectations or hopes around their work on the plan, because I think they will be a really important component of, being successful on this.
Yes, absolutely. We wanted to just, again, bring everyone together for this presentation. So I think it's helpful sometimes when we all hear kind of the same words and the same questions and the same thoughts. But you're absolutely right. I think the council, and I don't know, as you all know, we've got incredibly full agendas. And so I think there will be very robust discussion around much of this. So looking at when do we bring that back? And again, kind of, I think there were several strategies, I think, that were laid out as potential next steps, action steps for the council. And so we'll be working to figure out the best way to get that back in front of you sooner rather than later.
We do have another question from Charlie Trupito. EPA banned chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants are one of the worst greenhouse gases. Are you aware of any city programs that provide funding to residents for replacement costs of old air conditioners that use such refrigerants? While we have you, Karen.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any such programs, but hopefully there's something out there, perhaps something I'm not aware of. But yeah, refrigerants, we found out early in the process. If you've never read the book Drawdown, explains how refrigerants are one of the most potent and toxic and emitting components of anything on Earth, basically. And so yeah, solutions around those is important. Hopefully there's some programming out there. I'm sorry, I don't know of any at the moment.
No, that's true. And we, in Sustainability Commission, thanks in part to Josh Theedy's participation, but otherwise we've talked a lot about Drawdown, and maybe we could work to share that out across this group. That might be helpful. That's all I have.
right, seeing no further discussion, then I would suggest we end our meeting and see everybody later.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.